So people think it's about handstands and, you know, jumping on the rings and doing flips or whatever. And actually, our work is way, way beyond that. It's a completely different and a huge paradigm shift in the way that you think about your practice and your movement and your body.
The best reason to move is because you can. Like, I can really heal your body using this stick because now your spine has to do all those things. Maybe you got an injury there and I help you. High-tech shoes, low-tech feet. The more expensive the toys, the cheaper is the mover. How many movements did you learn last week? A contemporary dancer might learn up to 400 new movements in an audition setting. So the type of brain that gets developed there, I'm not talking about the body, I'm talking about neurological changes, is huge. I want to be the weirdo. I tell people, be the weirdo. Conor is confident. He lives life full on. We're having fun, and that's the way to make great things. Meditating on your death daily to remind ourselves that it's temporary. It's a good day to die.
As the founder and host of London Real, I've had the privilege of meeting and interviewing over 300 of the most fascinating people in the world. In the past 4 years, I've spoken to astronauts, members of parliament, Hollywood actors, and CEOs of billion-dollar companies. But every now and then, I meet someone who changes my life forever. Ido Portal is one of those people. I first met Ido in 2014 and encountered a man with a message. A man who was intent on communicating his views of movement to the world, and to do so without selling out. Ido is passionate, audacious, and relentless. Needless to say, I liked him immediately. In 2015, Ido returned to London Real in our brand new studio for another epic conversation. But something was just not right. Here I was, speaking to a man whose entire life is dedicated to human movement, and we were talking while sitting down. And so we decided to have London Real's very first moving conversation. Two men walking the streets of London in an unedited, unscripted, and uncut conversation. Anything goes, anything can happen. This was a fascinating time in Ido's life because he had just come back from Dublin, Ireland after training with the UFC interim featherweight champion, Conor McGregor. Only months earlier on the show, we had spoken about Conor, but he and Ido had still never met. A few weeks after this moving conversation, Ido would go on to famously join Conor for his entire week of pre-fight training filled with broomsticks and animal walks. The whole world was asking, who was this movement guy? It would culminate with Ido being ringside in Las Vegas to watch Conor knock out Jose Aldo in 13 seconds and become the undisputed world champion. This is our conversation. We are here in London at Hyde Park Corner next to this historic statue of Achilles, half man, half god, known for his speed and agility. And I am joined by Mr. Ido Portal, 100% god.
No, not at all.
Known for his movement, his ideology, his inspiration. Ido, thanks for joining me today on a moving conversation.
Thank you. It's a beautiful day.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
It's awesome to see you. You know, our last epic conversation was at London Real Studios 2 months ago, and we sat down for a couple hours. Before that, a year before that, we had another great conversation. And right at the end of our last interview, I thought to myself, this is a man who moves for a living. We must get him out and have a proper conversation, and not while he's sitting there. And so I thought we would go for a walk. You know, some of the greats like Steve Jobs used to go for walks. I think Mark Zuckerberg, before he bought WhatsApp for $19 billion, they did it on a walk. So if you'll walk with me today, maybe we can do a little business and talk about, about movement.
Yeah, beautiful. Very, very happy to be free this time.
Good, good. And also, last time, I was just about to go to your 2-day movement experience, and to say the least, I had a bit of a paradigm shift after spending 2 days with you in the seminar. I got to my gym on Monday morning and I looked around at all these people and I thought, what the fuck are they doing? You know, I saw them doing this, and I actually brought a pair of Olympic rings with me and I put them up, and someone came over to me and they said, you can't use those for health and safety reasons. And so I want to talk to you about what happened to me on that weekend, about the broomsticks and the animal movements and all of those pieces. So hopefully you can tell me what happened to me.
Yeah, I will try. It's a very individual thing, but I think I have a little bit of experience with that paradigm shift happening. So we'll talk about it. Yeah, it's interesting.
Good, well, let's talk. You've probably seen me. I've been climbing trees lately. I've been jumping on Olympic rings. I've been trying to walk along the ground like a lizard. I think you've seen me on the parallel bars. Something really changed in the way I've looked at movement, and I was wondering what happened to me.
Yeah, I think it's all that paradigm shift that depends so much on terminology and conceptualizing these ideas, and that tends to open all these doors. Sometimes to bring under the same umbrella many things that were scattered and isolated, and sometimes to isolate and open new doors within the movement possibilities. So the idea of play, the idea of communicating with objects, with the floor, with another person, to communicate with the elements, with gravity, with centrifugal forces, all this stuff that as a kid you basically treat all those things as one. It's a movement thing. But then with time, the adults in your life start to kind of isolate you and tell you this is not that, this is not this is sports, this is studies, this is serious, and this is play. Well, it's all play.
Another thing you said during the seminar was, you said, look at my shoes. These are 10 euro shoes. Look at these rings. These rings cost 30 pounds. Nothing here is prohibitively expensive. You can do this all with basic tools. Is that something you came up with out of necessity, or are you trying to make a point in that?
Exactly the opposite of necessity. The more money was involved in my life, the more money I made, more of a point I made it to not be supported, not be dependent, and not support products, commercial products. I'm a big believer in education. And the technologies and the products, they create a lot of dependency, and they strip us of the basic research. High-tech shoes, low-tech feet. The more expensive the toys, the cheaper is the mover. Yeah, one of my students said.
Okay.
So I think it's important to work on this thing and not to depend on all those gadgets and tips and tricks in the majority of the time. They were developed for a necessity, and that necessity was certain comforts, certain disabilities or problems, but they also create disabilities. You put on this highly supportive footwear, your foot is going to lose function. You don't demand it to work well. So I'm a big believer in don't wrap up your joints with supporting accessories, wrap your joints with exercise.
Okay, and that is kind of the idea, I think, behind your corset seminar, where you try to build the body to protect itself.
Yes.
One thing I noticed is that you had us experience some painful pieces, or you introduced us to a small dose of pain, I'd say kind of Ido Portal style, and you had us trying to do push-ups on our wrists. At one point, you and Odelia showed us how to almost do a push-up like on our fingers, and it was funny because I sat there and I was like, all right, here comes one rep, and I couldn't move. I couldn't lift myself up, you know, by my fingers. What was going on there?
Yeah, what's going on is people don't touch the floor anymore, you know? People simply don't make the simplest contact with the ground. And I'm not even talking about some esoteric layer of some ion exchange with the earth, but I'm talking really practically, do you even touch the floor, bro? Daily, daily. It's almost like a philosophical thing for me. If I was on a day of travel and I did not get the chance to do that, just before going to sleep, I would make one contact between my hands and the floor. We are losing function. We are not meant to walk on our hands all day long, but we are definitely opportunistic movers, which means if I have two rocks here and I want to pass in between them, I will momentarily support myself and propel myself in between them. So the hands are meant to communicate with all these objects and the floor, crawling, quadrupedaling, yeah, and we can take it into the beautiful realm of inversion, handstands and acrobatics as well, but that is beyond the point.
Okay. And do you think it's your capoeira background that made you extra comfortable with your hands and knowing that was a necessity?
100%, yeah. The capoeira introduced me to that importance and the beauty of being comfortable close to the ground.
Right.
And there are many legends in capoeira about why it became to be. Part of it is there is this. It's a legend. Might have a grain of truth to it. Who knows? About the slaves being enslaved in this low slave quarters, prisons, okay. And because of that low position, they used to kind of communicate with the floor more. Also, their hands were shackled. Hence, they used their legs a lot more than their hands, and from there comes a lot of these capoeira movements.
Okay, all right, so that's a lot of the, okay,
yeah.
Interesting,
yeah.
Okay, all right, so, and that, it's funny how a limitation can create a separate art or a separate type of modality and movement.
I'm a big believer in using boundaries and limitations and rules to create freedom. And I think like the only way to expand freedom is by limitation and boundaries. Like I can really heal your body using this stick because now your spine has to do all those things. Maybe you got an injury there and I help you, I treat you.
Right.
So people look at it more as an attack and defense, but it's more than that. For example, lock your knees. You're not allowed to bend your knees, okay? So now it's all spine. Okay, another rule.
Okay, yeah.
Your spine must remain straight, locked.
Straight, okay.
Straight. There is no bending, there is no... So now we go to the knees, okay. And we heal those knees.
Okay.
You understand? So I can shift the attention to certain areas or stay down in a squat. Go down to a squat. You're not allowed to move these points of contact, okay. And you're not allowed to come up to stand.
Okay. Okay, all right.
Don't overreact.
Okay.
So now I work on your knees.
Okay.
Now I develop your knees. In 3 minutes, I might be push your hips. Look at it. Look at it. Look where it's going. Aha. And now clear the knees here in front. Look. So I'm really developing your knees now.
So we're neck crack.
Yeah, so now all your body is getting stimulated in all these different positions.
Right.
So
And also, if I had been in a static squat, I'd be thinking about my ankles now. But since you're doing all that stuff, I've probably been in a static squat without thinking about it.
yeah, I do this for like sets of 3 minutes down there, and your whole ligaments, your whole knees must restructure, you know, must condition themselves. And it's a more realistic squat. Because you don't just, you know, stop in a squat. You need that adaptability in positions.
Okay.
Cool, man.
And so some of the things you did with us that day, one of the most powerful pieces was when you started off with me learning how to move my neck again. And part of me was thinking, okay, what's Ido doing? I mean, to be honest, a lot of it was just me being uncomfortable being in your experience. And it started off with slow movements and then turned into bigger movements, and then you would restrict us. And you would say, okay, you can't move your legs. Now you must dodge my hand. And then you would let us move one leg. And it was all about introducing constraints and then seeing how the body and mind reacted.
Yeah, that's the process, is opening up a few options. It's a little bit something that happens in BJJ. I got to do some BJJ over the last 2 weeks with one of my students, John, who's been teaching me the basics. And he says, you open one door and you squeeze the person out of that door. It's a little bit, that's the only option left. So I'm using similar concept with just general movement development. I open a very specific door, and then I allow the person to take that journey. And once he's comfortable in that structure, in that house, traveling in between all of these rooms, I let him play freely.
Okay, okay. So you give specific constraints and rules, and then you let them play and explore what they could. Okay. I have to ask you about the locomotion, because I found that very fascinating. It was the second day, and you started talking about, I think it was bipedal motion, or the way that many animals move. And, you know, I've found that, of course, I'm starting to get interested in these animal movements. I know when you were at SBG Gym in Ireland with Conor and Gunnar, that they're big fans of the animal movement, and I want to ask you about them later. Why have us move as animals? Why?
We are animals. We are a product of that evolution, and it's inside of us somewhere. This system has evolved into where it is through all those stages. So a lot of possibilities to move your spine are still kind of aquatic possibilities, old remains of that freedom that originated in the water. And then the quadrupedal movement, the walking on all fours, still exists inside our bodies. So exploring those things is exploring yourself and exploring your history, exploring where you came from. That's one thing. Another thing is just that I love any possibility that exists. Whatever possibility is in my body, I would like to explore it, because it's there. Because we don't need another reason. Because we live in this body, and it's a good day that we can explore those things. And once we start to lose those functions, everyone realizes it. It's like, oh, I want that back. And you would pray for all gods in existence to get 10% of what you lost. But why do we need to go through that route? We don't need that. We need appreciation every day for this great sun, for this body, for this neck that can glide and move, and and the pain-free existence that we have, so we can maintain it and we can sustain it. So the best reason to move is because you can.
Because you can. One of the things I loved about spending time with you moving is that ideas come out in you, and I get to see kind of how your evolution has happened. And at one point someone raised their hand and they said, Ido, I have a question about conditioning and this muscle here, and do you agree with this? And you said, when I used to do this seminar, I would say, look at all my knowledge. And you could rattle off the research you've done and the study you've done and the years where you tried this and you tried this. And now what you do is you say, this is the way I'm telling you to do it for the maximum results. And when you taught me how to do that ring muscle up, you said, this is the way to do it. Do it this to this to this to this, and you'll get the result. And I could see your 10,000 hours there. And so for me, that was a huge resource because I could see that you had done all of this work and realized that for me as a beginner, to do it this way, it would work. Can you talk about your evolution from being the guy that used to talk about all of that knowledge to now just giving that specific direction?
Yeah, it's the beginner teacher is somewhat occupied with presenting the vastness of his knowledge.
Right.
It's an ego-driven thing. You are helping people, but at the same time you have another dogma at your back showing. It's a peeing contest of a sort, or showing, submitting the students to the amount of knowledge that you have. But that creates some problems with paralysis by analysis, first and foremost. People cannot handle a lot of details, a lot of information. At any specific stage, there is a limitation, there is a cap to the amount of information you can relay. Hence, you need to be very accurate with the right type of information, because you feel that that stack very quickly. Yeah, and with time you become much more pinpointed, much more realistic, and the results are better, I think.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I could tell that you had been the guy that had shown off, and now you're like, look, I'm just giving you, the basics here. Another thing I remember you saying was, we don't do core work. You said, I don't do core work. And yet, when I get done doing a lizard walk in the park, I am huffing and puffing. This is from a guy who can kick Thai pads until my shins bleed, who can do kettlebells, and yet I feel a core engaged when I'm doing these animal movements. Why don't you do core work?
I don't do any isolated work. I don't look at it that way. Unless I need to pinpoint a problem area and attack it specifically. And in this case, the core is rarely the problem. It has been blamed. There is trends in anything, and definitely within fitness or exercise, there are many trends, and one of them is core. And it has been demonized and blamed for anything under the sun. But I see a lot of other areas failing much before. Whether it's your scapula connection, which is much more hypermobile and problematic to stabilize and strengthen, or many other. It can be your ankle, it can be your big toe. So I don't do core much, but my core gets hammered in the daily work anyways. Yeah.
Okay. I scripted some horses to join us today, just to come along, and maybe you could tell us a bit about this animal movement here. Do you ever get inspiration from horses?
Oh, from all animals, yeah. Yeah, they're amazing animals. A lot of their movement patterns, original movement patterns, are very different than what we make them do.
Ah, okay, right.
But you can see a counterlateral pattern, beautiful, opposite, swinging. just very efficient. Sometimes the humans train them to add a specific gesture or to take an ipsilateral walk.
Right.
Huge, powerful animal, beautiful, muscular, lean. Yeah, just inspiring and so powerful. You just stand in their presence and the heat radiating off this animal is just like, what an engine is here.
Right.
You know, what kind of a raw power is here, yeah.
And so when you see an animal like that, you see an opportunity to learn about movement, to learn about locomotion.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, that's fascinating. What do you think? I know you move all around the world. You're kind of a nomad. You're off spreading the message. You spend time in Germany. When you're here in England and you see the horses ride through, you know, in a place like this with historic monuments, how does it make you feel?
Oh, it's beautiful, just beautiful day, just inspiring. And the parks and the outdoors is something that I feel very connected to. I don't want to spend my life indoors, and yeah, I think like it promotes a lot more movement. Just being outside just makes you move that much more.
One of the exercises that we did with you was with a broomstick, and I think you told the story where you were somewhere, maybe up in Finland or somewhere where it was snowbound, and you went to the gym to train, but you got depressed because now that I look at gyms, they don't offer a lot of spontaneity. There's not a lot of places to play, like a monkey or hang or do these things, and so you found the most basic of instruments and you started playing games and dropping the broomstick games and things like that. And I want to hear about that from you, but I also found it fascinating that you use this simple technique to assess the physicality or the gifts of pro snowboarders, MMA fighters, all these top athletes, just seeing how they react to the gravity of a broomstick dropping. Can you tell me a bit about the history of you and the stick?
Yeah, well, it's a funny thing. I always loved the good stick. Who doesn't? And when I was recently in Ireland working with the fighters, I talked with Conor Nelson about this, and I feel so close to Conor in our thinking, in our ideas. Me, Conor, and him is just like a very interesting talks arise there. And one of the things that Conor said was like, I always love sticks. You know, just having the feel of a stick in my hand and exploring its options. And you walk outside as a kid and you find a stick and it becomes your companion, right? And so this is something that I was always into those simple things and exploring them, exploring the options, throwing it, bouncing it, rotating it over my body, letting it drop, catching it, playing with a friend, hitting a friend with it, you know, all these different options. How hard can I hit myself with it? What happens when I hit myself hard with it? All these basic explorations. And with the years, I decided instead of taking myself seriously and starting to use all these high-tech gadgets, is actually to make it a point to go back to the stick. I also knew that I can find a stick wherever I go. It's very easy, it's cheap, and it's accessible. So I decided to invest some more time into researching it, and that proved to be a great asset. So nowadays I travel around the world and I just tell the local hosts, okay, make sure there are 100 sticks there, and there are 100 sticks, and it costs them, you know, 100 pounds to arrange it, versus depending on all this, elaborate gadgets. And the stick is linear. The stick will might bend a little bit, but you will bend a lot more than it. You are organic. There is nothing linear in your body. So there is this interesting relationship between you and the stick. It can give you all these markers, all these incentives, and help us develop.
I saw Ronda Rousey, the UFC fighter who fought last weekend. I want to ask you more later about her fight, but she did a 30-minute warm-up routine. The first 8 minutes was her and a broomstick. And she brings it out and she puts it over her shoulders, and actually she can see her, she's rubbing the forearms with it. She's doing all these different planes of motion. And I never noticed that until I'd spent the time with you and the stick, that, that she used that tool. was, what is the typical reaction that someone has after they get all of this knowledge into them?
Sometimes people become, it's too much, it's too big, it's too critical of their lifestyle and current choices, and sometimes people are very brave and they embrace and they get inspired to make huge changes. And it can be anything in between. Mostly we get very, very positive responses, tears, letters handed in, presents. Just this weekend here in London, received presents from people, and yeah, just showing their gratitude for this mind shift, this paradigm shift. And it starts to open up all these doors, which can be very confusing. I sympathize, and yet I still go very hard on them to be able to open those doors, because I believe there is a huge potential there. And the more we can do that with our current culture and society, the more we will live a better life, a better legacy, the more we will care for this body, for this planet, the more we will be aware and yeah, practice what's important, really.
One thing one of my trainers said when I got back with him, he's a good friend of mine, and I came back and I said, this is what I did over the weekend, and I'm going to start doing this. And he said, Brian, if I told you to climb on the floor like a lizard, you would laugh at me. But when Ido tells you to do it, you do it. And so I said to him, I said, you're right, that's true. But I said, it's the why. And I said, it's all about the why. There's a famous TED Talk about the why. And why does someone do something? And that's what fascinates us as humans. And so for you, I know that you've gone through this journey in your brain, and you've found that these things are utilitarian for you. And so knowing that you've done that, that's why I go and try those things out.
Yeah, it goes back to the point that we've discussed last time. When you find good teaching and a good teacher, doesn't matter what the subject is. And that's why it's very easy to make people do stuff that they never would have done in another scenario once the why and the inspiration and the reasoning is there. Actually, all movement, there is no bad movement. There is no, in the kindergarten, there is no bad kid. It's all movements are good. All movements are potentially productive and can help us become more aware, more connected, more mobile, more smooth. It is more about opening your mind to the possibilities and then realizing, when will that movement serve me? So crawling on the floor all of a sudden makes sense. And once it makes sense, it's very easy to implement, and you fall in love with things that you wouldn't even look twice before.
Yeah. Yeah, because now when I'm doing it, so now I will actually crawl along the gym floor as a lizard in a very nice posh gym, and I'm the only one there. And yet it doesn't bother me now, because I know, and I'm fascinated to learn and to try to get better. And I know that after crawling across, everything has worked, I've moved, I'm feeling things open up, and I'm actually getting a learning curve progression every time. Like my walk gets better and better and better. And I don't see this type of progression in the things I've been doing for 10 years. And you talked about level 1, level 2, level 3 during the movement experience. And I was wondering, is that what I'm experiencing now with those animal locomotions?
Yeah, zone 1, zone 2, zone 3. Zone 1 is when you're introduced to a new concept and you can't do it yet. You can't fulfill the physical task, or you cannot make it happen. Then zone 2 is when you already made it, but it's not smooth, it's not perfected. Zone 3 is when it's perfected. Zone 1 is where most of the possibilities are. Zone 1 is where the best learning happens. Even if you never make it, you would receive the same benefits. This is a point that is made by Stephen Jepson, this 74-year-old man I brought to the Less Movement camp, and his methodology is called Never Leave the Playground. He says, try to learn how to juggle. Whether you made it or not, 2 people devoted 3 months to the practice. One made it and can juggle 3 balls. The other one cannot. MRI studies of their brain will show the same exact results. So it actually doesn't even matter if you make it or not. Zone 1 is the most beneficial one. Zone 2 still carries a lot of benefits. As you're perfecting that lizard crawl, you still gain a lot of learning and neurological and structural changes. And then Zone 3 has the least amount to offer to you. It's more maintenance. Where is the fitness world focused on? Zone 3.
Right.
It's all movement that even from the first day you can perform. You're just improving them. You're just perfecting them. So maximum Zone 2, Zone 3. Zone 1, people don't learn new shit. And learning new things every day is very important. How many movements did you learn last week? Most people, none. Some, maybe 2, 3. A contemporary dancer might learn up to 400 new movements in an audition setting. So the type of brain that gets developed there, I'm not talking about the body, I'm talking about neurological changes, is huge. And that's the direction that we start to steer people towards. Consistent learning. Now, once consistent learning is where you want to go, what does it make the teacher into? First, a student himself, because that teacher needs to continue to inject new information in. And second, an encyclopedia of knowledge. And that's why I believe we should invest and reward education more than gadgets, certification courses, and watered down, systems. Yeah, we should reward quality education, people who are devoting their life to research and progress their students and themselves.
Okay. Yeah, and you always say that the brain is a result of the body being so complex. And that as humans, we are the most complex movers of anything in the animal kingdom. And I guess that goes with what you're saying, is that if you're learning 400 new movements a week, that brain is constantly working, being challenged.
Constantly. Yeah, it's just, it's like a mathematician and, is constantly in a challenge and constantly continues to develop those connections. His neurons, neural networks are constantly evolving, developing, changing. And so the brain that changes itself, like the book, like the name of the famous book, you're constantly in movement and the brain is in movement. Your character is in constant movement. Brian Rose, that collection of symbols and ideas and neural networks is constantly increasing in complexity and adapting to the environment around us. So why wouldn't we do this with movement, which is actually the biggest tool for that development? No amount of learning, no amount of mathematics would make the changes, the neurological changes as movement will, because movement was the original reason behind the brain's development.
Right.
It's the first door.
And we want to stay in that level 1 all the time, which means even if you're failing, try. And it's natural for us as humans to probably go to something that we're getting better at, but you want to try to always put new riddles, new challenges.
Yes, I don't stay on level 1, but I make sure level 1 is always present. I use all 3 levels. Zone 1, Zone 2, Zone 3. I learn new movements constantly. I improve those that I don't perform well enough, and I also maintain and perfect movements. But the Zone 1, since it's been neglected so much, I want to open people's eyes to it more. Learn new stuff. Never leave the playground.
Right. Yeah, it was fascinating because you told me to expect riddles. And when you brought us there, when the sticks came out, you call them kinetic cones. Is that, or coens?
Yeah, coens.
Coens. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, it's a term that a few years ago I was stuck in frozen Boston with a good friend of mine, Aaron, in the US. And we were freezing cold in his house. Both of us, me, him, and Odelia, cramped up in this house. We all love to move all the time, and we couldn't move much. It was snow up to here. And I started to present Odelia and Aaron these riddles. And we started to play with it, and we started to kind of pull more and more riddles and more options. And then Aaron, who has a background in kind of Zen philosophy, and he said, okay, it's a little bit like a koan. And then I said, yeah, kinetic koan, a movement riddle. And yeah, it stuck. And that concept is something that I I love, and I love those riddles, those movement riddles. I actually collected hundreds, over 500 different kinetic riddles, kinetic koans that I present to people, to my students, to help them develop. And it's something that got kind of popularized and started to become more abundant through my work, through the movement experience workshop that we gave all over the world.
Okay, okay, and that's what you put people through. You put your martial artists through those things as well, and you did that to me in the experience.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And was that some of those pieces with the moving the shoulders as well? With the...
Yeah, all kinds of communication pieces with sticks, or with the rocks, or with the floor, or with another person, or with yourself within your own body. It's incredible to see how you can get into a knot in your own body.
Okay.
It's a really interesting moment I get to see again and again with people. People can get stuck in their own bodies. Everyone. I can get stuck in my own body.
Are you constantly seeing and thinking about movement and motion when you're walking and about, or do you tune out of that sometimes? Or is Ido movement and is movement Ido?
Yeah, it's a little bit. I cannot think of movement because I am movement. It's not something that I shift my attention towards anymore, because I spend so much time constantly kind of bringing my attention into movement that now it just stays there. And I will shift and move, and like I will be working on the computer and I will be constantly moving, or as I'm walking, I'm noticing what is happening with my spine, and I will manipulate it in certain ways. I will notice areas getting locked off, close up. Yeah, the motions of my neck, the awareness to the space between my fingers, the air that is passing in the negative spaces created by my body. It's just, I spend so much time researching those things and playing with them that now it's just, it is there all the time. It's like breathing for you. And that's the childlike state. That's why children don't segregate and isolate. Everything is movement. And they sit in the car and they move because you lock them in this space, but you will not stop them from moving.
Do you go and ever watch children play in the school and just look at the different ways they move and you're like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Children and animals are huge sources of inspiration for me. Yeah, and have been since the age of man. You know, kung fu masters and the animals styles and the childlike strength and all these phenomenons. Yeah, huge sources of inspiration because the system is intuitive. Sometimes I get angry at people, parents, who tell their children how to move. How dare you invade a perfect system, a perfectly intuitive system that knows exactly what it should do because it hasn't been tamed yet. You are destroying it. Now, you know, children sit in this W position on the floor, knees out, and some douchebag physiotherapist would tell them, no, it's not good for you. What do you know about their system? Actually, they are bulletproofing themselves for the future, but we put them in the chairs by the age of 6, so by 18, they're disabled. They lost this range of motion, that mobility. And some maintain it better, like you. You maintain like great softness in your body, suppleness, and some get locked up more. And it also has prices. Your body is more allowing ranges of motion, but it means you will be more susceptible for certain injuries. And strength development would be more tricky for you.
Yeah.
And then there are the other side, people who their body is over-panicked will protect them more. They will not get injured so easily, but they will get stronger very easily. So that's just one vector, yeah, of development.
And that's with your philosophy, is there are always trade-offs. And I listened to our very first episode, and you said, you know, I believe in optimizing movements, which is different than, say, a fighter who wants to do fighting or someone who wants aesthetics, and each person will sacrifice. And if you want to be the healthiest, Ido, by definition, you won't if you want to optimize movements.
Yes.
And so we're constantly making these sacrifices.
Yes, yes. Yeah, you're constantly making choices, even by not making choices. And wherever you develop yourself, you're also moving away from another element. You're moving towards that, you're moving away from that. There is no way to move towards that without moving away from that. And it's as simple as that. I try to kind of grow in this way. I move a little bit towards that, and I stretch a little bit towards the other side, and then I remember there is these vectors as well, and I just try to stay in the middle and kind of swell up and grow in the most lateral possible way. And it's a tricky game. Maybe it's an impossible game, but it gives me great pleasure just attempting it.
Which again is level 1, right?
Yes.
So attempting these things. You have this analogy called the shirt pull, and I was wondering if you could explain what that means to people who don't understand. And I think what it's saying is that you can never change one thing in isolation because everything is linked, and if you pull this here, it's going to pull on the back. What do you mean when you say that?
Yeah, any system that is connected, it is one system. There are many times ripple effects of any change inside the system. And that goes to a tensegrity model, like a shirt where I pull on it. Every atom in the shirt is affected because of the physical connection. And the same happens in our bodies. You cannot move anything in isolation in the human body. It's an impossibility. We've fallen into this trap of trying to isolate pieces. It's impossible. Whenever I do this, I affect my big toe. Whenever I blink, I affect my pelvic floor. Everything is connected and affected, and the whole system is in constant dynamic movement. So once you take this into account, it doesn't even make sense to isolate things anymore, because it's an impossibility. The maximum you can do is to target certain areas, certain patterns. Notice I'm not saying muscles, because that's an impossibility again. And that moves you towards much more holistic solutions.
So this is one of my favorite walks I always take in the city, and it always takes me through some memorials, which I guess is common that big cities would have in the center. And this is a memorial to one of the branches of the Royal Air Force. And it was Winston Churchill that famously said, "Never was so much owed by so many to so few." And I think he was talking specifically about 1940, when it was the Royal Air Force defending Britain from a pending German invasion. When I see memorials like this, sometimes I start thinking about, there's this whole concept called the denial of death. And it's this whole idea that as a human species, we can't deal with the idea that we die. And so one of the ways we do is we erect these statues of our children and our fathers dying in war. And then we put them up and say, oh, this is the reason why we die. And that people now drive by here and they say, oh yeah, that's the reason we made a sacrifice for our ideals. But it's just the human animal trying to get our heads around death.
Sounds very strong and very true, yeah, in many ways. This reminds me of, the reasoning behind why churches are so big?
No.
To make you feel small in the face of God. So they're made into these huge structures. We're basically an animal that tries to wrap its head around a few 2 million years of human evolution, where in the last hundreds and thousands of years, we had to take such leaps and bounds in what we need to accept, what we need to live, that we've developed all these ways of going about it.
To watch part 2 of my moving conversation with Ido Portal for free, go to LondonRealAcademy.com.
I will find it very interesting to see Jose Aldo adapting to what Conor brings to the table. The variety in vocabulary, in offensive movement, It's just incredible, incredible.
All the trees are protected under Royal Park regulations.
We were just restricted from doing movement.
I am moving every day, I'm meeting incredible people. It's another beautiful day on this planet. And it's also a good day to die.